So at that time, this was really groundbreaking. It was a real new theory. And it's also, especially at the time, and still is, it's quite counterintuitive, right? And then Goldratt could have written the book in a very rational way. The problem is, if you write a book as a rational way, you need to break it apart, and then describe all the little parts, and then the people might get lost in the whole. And so that's why Goldratt wrote it as a story, so that the reader can discover it together with him, and you don't lose don't lose sight of the whole picture. So that was a very deliberate choice. Now there's a very specific scene in the book where Alex, so we've got the two main characters in the book, Alex, who is running a factory, and the factory is not doing well. And then you've got Jonah, who is the advisor. He looks young on the picture, but in the book you might think he's a little bit older. So Jonah who is the advisor to Alex. And then Jonah always talks in riddles. And deliberately he talks in riddles so that Alex could figure it out by himself. Yeah. And then at a certain point in time, Alex gets a little bit tired of that. He wants to get results. I want to have outcomes. I want to have it now. It says like, I'm tired of your riddles. I need answers. I need an outcome by next month. And then Jonas says like, yeah, but if I would tell you the answers, you wouldn't get it. Yeah, you would not be able to grasp it. Yeah. And even if you would be able to grasp it, you would not be able to put it into practice. So you need to figure this out by yourself. Okay. So that is for me the most important message from the goal. Next to the theory of constraints, I think there's a bigger message. It's also for me the difference between outcomes, because in the agile world we talk a lot about outcomes, but I think it's not just about outcomes. It's also about capabilities. That's the difference between the view of Alex and the view of Jonah. Alex looks at outcomes. He wants to deliver widgets at the end of the month. He wants to get revenue at the end of the month. He wants to have outcomes. Now, Jonah knows that, yeah, he might be able to help Alex in the short term to get some outcomes, but that doesn't build a capability. Yeah, that doesn't build a capability. And in the end, it's about not just about an outcome, it's about a capability. Consistently producing an outcome, not just by accident 1 month or by forcing it for 1 month, but by consistently producing a certain outcome. Even if the situations are variable, even sometimes when the situations are difficult, you can still produce that outcome. Yeah. So a capability is not just an outcome now, it's an outcome now and in the future. Yeah? And so that's what we're looking for. It's not just outcomes, it's capability. Yeah? And then even, especially for the coaches amongst us and the agile practitioners amongst us, it's not just about delivering a capability, it's also about having the capability to deliver new capabilities, to develop new capabilities. So in your context, what are the capabilities? What are the capabilities that you're developing as an organization that you're focusing on? What are the capabilities that you're focusing on? I just want to make sure that you see the difference between an outcome and a capability. Yeah? Yeah, being able to deliver just in time. Flexibility. Flow. capability of limiting work to capacity, the capability to respond to change. Yeah. Patience. Yeah. So I think we get the picture. Yeah. Yeah. The capability to discover new markets. I think we get the picture. So this is for me like the goal. If we talk about the goal, it's not just producing outcomes. The goal is to build capabilities. Now I see in a lot of communities, I see quite some idealism. We lift a certain way of working to an ideal. Yeah? And we talk about ideal capabilities. Yeah? We talk about ideal capabilities of small teams that are independent from each other, that are completely cross-functional. Yeah? So those are ideals. Yeah? And obviously, in principle, in the ideal world, we would want to have work to flow without friction. We want to have people to collaborate without friction. We want to have people to learn without friction. Yeah? Now that's an ideal. What's reality? Yeah? Reality, that is, there are dependencies. There are people that are specializing in a certain role. Yeah? There are silos in the organization. There are handoffs. Yeah? And so that's less than ideal. That's reality. Yeah? Now, where does that come from? Yeah, that comes from a certain tension. Yes, we want to have people collocated in one location, but at the same time, we want to have the best talent wherever that talent is. Yeah. So there are all kinds of trade-offs. Yeah. There are all kinds of tensions that lead to those frictions. Yeah. That's the reality. Capabilities are not ideal. They never are. And when we'll talk about the scaling patterns themselves, I will point out places where you might even question whether there is an ideal. Yeah. Okay. To me, agility is about dealing with the reality, not believing in some ideal. And I know that this might be contested and that some people might react strongly to this, but that's my firm belief. So yes, there might be some ideal somewhere there, but the reality is there are forces that work against each other and that create friction. Okay, and we need to deal with that friction. So which frictions do you encounter in your work environment? What frictions do you encounter that keep you away from that supposed ideal? Mismatched mindsets, yeah. Bottlenecks, not being taken care of in the proper way, local optimization, the company culture, local targets, perfectionism on the part of a few. Yeah. People are people, huh? Yeah, people are people. Okay. Personal conflicts, even that. Yeah. Okay. So people are people and organizations are organizations. Okay. Now there's two ways of dealing with friction. There's a duality here. There's a duality. There's a downstream way of dealing with friction and there's an upstream way of dealing with friction. Now, I can best illustrate this with a story. Actually, Dan Heath wrote a book about upstream, not the upstream that we think about in Kanban, but the upstream as I'm depicting here on the slide in terms of another way of thinking. And so that story comes out of the book of Dan Heath. So he talks about two persons, let's say two women, that are walking down a stream, and suddenly they see a kid drifting by and starting to drown.
I don't see your slide.
Am I the only
one who doesn't see your slide?
Your slides are visible.
I see the slide.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I found it.
Sorry, Arno.
No, it's my fault. Sorry.
Found it. Cool.
Okay, so they see a kid drifting by and starting to drown. So they jump into the water, and then they try to rescue the kid. Yeah. Now, before the first kid is rescued, a second kid comes by. It's like, wow, what's happening? So they try to, they're not even still busy with the first one, and they're already trying to rescue the second kid. Yeah. Now, while they're rescuing the second kid, there's a third kid. And so one of the women starts discussing with the other, like how they should organize, and there's some tensions there in terms of how should we deal with those tensions in terms of getting one out of the water while we're already working on the second one. And before she knows it, the second woman just walks out of the water and starts walking away. And so the woman in the water says like, hey, what are you doing? I need to cope with these children. We don't have time. Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look upstream. I'm going to look upstream. Who is pushing those children into the water? Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of illustrates the difference between upstream and downstream. Now, there's a danger to that story. There's a danger to that story because in all our habits of downstream thinking, we might interpret this story as, yeah, you need to do a root cause analysis. Well, it's not about a root cause analysis. It's about just being creative in your thinking and developing new patterns of thinking. It's not just doing a root cause analysis. It's thinking in a different way. Yeah. So downstream thinking is about looking at things in isolation. We look at frictions in isolation. Yeah. We isolate, we analyze, yeah, like a root cause analysis, and look for a theory, a method, or some doctrine that tells us what to do. That tells us that helps us to make the trade-offs. Yeah. So that's downstream thinking. Upstream thinking is uncovering new ways, is recognizing not just the parts, it's recognizing the whole. Frictions are correlated with each other. They are connected. They present us with contradictions, and they require new ways of thinking, new patterns of thinking. Yeah. We don't want to make trade-offs, we want to break trade-offs. Yeah. We want to break the status quo. Now, this upstream, downstream is also related to how our brain works. Yeah. According to Ian McGilchrist, a brain researcher, the left hemisphere is downstream thinking. Left hemisphere looks at things in isolation, break things apart, pull them out of context, abstract away. Yeah. So it's very mechanistic, parts-oriented thinking. The right hemisphere is about looking at the connections, looking at the whole. Yeah. And so it's also correlated to just the way our brain functions. Okay. Now, it's not about the one that is better than the other. There's a reason why we have a left and a right part to our brain. It's about using both parts of the brain. Okay. So we're gonna start downstream with methods, and then we're gonna gradually move upstream. So my very simple view, maybe simplistic view on methods. This is, for me, the simplest way of looking at what a method is. It's a bunch of practices and principles. So a method combines a fixed set of practices and principles, and the assumption is that if you apply the practices while respecting the principles, you produce a certain outcome. Okay. that's kind of the assumption. So I might be a little bit simplistic here. Try to boil it down to its essence, right? So if you apply the practices while respecting the principles, you produce a certain outcome. Okay? So I'm going to introduce a little piece of notation here. So in the picture here, whoops, in the picture here. So this is the what I want to draw your attention to. So the notation is you've got a practice arrow with the square here. The arrow with the square here produces an outcome while respecting the principles. Okay. So for example, there's an assumption that if you respect the Kanban principles and you do a replenishment cadence, that you will produce an outcome of deferred commitment. Okay. If I take a little bit, maybe a more simpler example, if we limit the WIP, we will produce a shorter lead time, the outcome of a shorter lead time. Yeah. Now, obviously, the practice itself, the notation might be a little bit misleading. The practice itself does not produce an outcome. It's applying the practice, applying that practice while respecting those principles. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Now there's a little pitfall here. There's a little pitfall here in that sense that there is context. Yeah, there is context. There is context. So even if we respect the principles, practices only produce an outcome in a certain context. Okay. Principles. We often talk about mindset as a context. But there's more than just mindset as a context, obviously. There's the way your organization operates. Are you a small organization or are you a big organization? Kanban in a small organization might produce other outcomes than Kanban in a big organization. So there's all kinds of factors that we call context, factors that are very specific to your organization, specific to your team, that have an influence on what outcomes a certain practice actually produces. Okay, a cap whip in a small organization might have a different meaning than a cap whip in a big organization. Yeah? So replenishment cadence in certain contexts might have a different meaning than replenishment cadence in another context. Yeah. So there's all kinds of things, and oftentimes we talk about this like mindsets, but there's all kinds of other things. Is your organization distributed, yes or no? Do you work with offshore partners? All kinds of things that determine context. Yeah. And so we need to take that into account. A practice only produces an outcome in a certain context. Yeah. Now, the point that I want to draw your attention to is that practices in themselves also provide a context. Okay. The already existing practices in the organization provide a context for the new practices that you want to put into place. Okay. Introducing Kanban in a virgin organization that has never ever introduced any methodology will be different. Any agile methodology will be different from introducing Kanban in an organization that, for example, is already underway in terms of doing Scrum. Yeah. So one set of practices will have an influence on, will provide a context for another set of practices. Yeah. For me, the eye-opener here was Ken Beck, Extreme Programming, the first edition of the book. where Ken Beck said, like, each of all my extreme programming practices, each of them individually, they're not good ideas, they're not good practices. But if you combine them together, they really become very powerful. Okay, test-driven development, or let's say the other way around, refactoring, without test-driven development produces different outcomes than refactoring with test-driven development. Yeah, I can assure you. Yeah. So practices provide a context. Now, I'm going to zoom into that. There's one set of practices that plays a specific role, and this is the constraints. So some of what we call practices are actually constraints, enabling constraints. Yeah. They constrain the behavior. They constrain the behavior in a way that enables, or they constrain people in a way that enables new behavior to occur. It creates a context for other practices. For example, limiting WIP, that's a constraint. Yeah. And actually the limiting of WIP through the creation of shorter lead times is actually the context in which replenishment cadence actually produces a deferred commitment. Okay. If you don't limit your WIP, it's very hard to defer commitment, right? If your lead times are very long, it's very hard to defer commitments. Yeah. Because it takes a very long time before something gets produced. So what do? Yeah. We're going to push to get it started as soon as possible. Yeah. If my lead times are very long, my customers are going to push for, yes, this is urgent. I need it now because my lead times are very long. Yeah. And so limiting WIP is a constraint that through the shortening of the lead times actually enables us to defer the commitment. Okay. So there's this specific set of practices that what we call practices that are actually constraints, and those constraints enable other practices to produce a certain outcome. Do you know, and now this is a dangerous question, because once you explain the notion of an enabling constraint and you ask, do you know other examples of an enabling constraint? The danger is that all of the practices that you know become an enabling constraint. Yeah. So there's a danger in asking this question, but do you know of other practices that are actually constraints, that are enabling other things to, other outcomes? What comes to mind?
Time boxing.
Yeah, that's number one. That's if something comes to mind, it's either limiting WIP, time boxing, it's the second one. Yeah. Cadence. We constrain, especially synchronized cadence. You might consider that as a constraint. Anything else? I'm going to ask you to think a little bit in the areas of extreme programming, if you're familiar with extreme programming.
Pair programming.
Maybe pair programming, yeah.
Pair programming, yeah. If I'm doing a workshop and I want to have people that are not familiar with each other to get to know each other, I put in a constraint. I say you work together with somebody that you don't know. Okay. So that's a constraint. Collaboration policies. So those are all constraints. Now, these constraints, as we all are very, very well aware of, these constraints surface a certain tension, right? If you start talking about limiting WIP, and you are thinking about, yeah, if we limit the WIP, then we're going to shorten our lead times, and this will allow us to defer commitment, right? That's what you are thinking about as a coach, yeah, or as a practitioner. But then on the other side of the table, there's somebody else that says like, ooh, but I'm going to be idle. Yeah, and I don't want to be idle. Or a manager that says, yeah, but maybe not everybody's going to be busy. And we need to keep everybody busy. So this constraint surfaces a certain tension. Okay. If you start talking about a time box, yeah, then probably what you're thinking about is, if we time box, we get feedback faster, so we can learn a lot faster. Yeah. And then on the other side there's this like, yeah, but do I need to give a commitment in the beginning of the time box? And I'm not sure whether I can keep to that commitment. And so there's a tension between like this uncertainty and the need for learning, and then this, on the other side, the need for commitment. It's like, how do we deal with that tension? Now that tension, most of the time, doesn't show up like this. It shows up like resistance to change. We say like, yeah, so this person, it's like, yeah, he's resisting change. He's not cooperating with us. So it surfaces as resistant to change, but actually it's a symptom of a deeper tension. Yeah. Now, what has evolved over time is a number of patterns, and here we're starting to talk about patterns that actually help to resolve that tension. The patterns are there to help us to deal with that tension, with that apparent conflict. For example, when limiting WIP, we actually can reduce the impediments, the things that impede work from flowing, by having better blocker management, by managing blockers better. And then if we have less things that impede the flow, then the WIP policy and I'm making the difference now between a WIP policy and an actual limited WIP. The WIP policy is the number that we put on top of the board. Limited WIP is actually the fact that WIP is really limited. So reducing the impediments actually turns the WIP policy into actually limited WIP. If we have less impediments, it's easier to stick to that WIP policy, or we can better limit the WIP. Yeah, and then obviously, if we limit the WIP, we manage flow. That enables to get shorter lead times. Okay, so this is a pattern that has emerged in the Kanban community that helps us to deal with that tension between shorter lead times and keeping everybody busy. Because if we remove the impediments, then it's easier to have both shorter lead time as well as keeping everybody busy. Yeah. We want to have it all. Yeah. So that's a pattern that emerged. Now the good thing is that some of these patterns, and actually this pattern also, actually maintains itself. In technical terms, it's what is called auto-catalytic. It's self-enabling, right? So if we reduce the impediments and that enables the limiting of WIP, then enables shorter lead time, which enables deferred commitment. Now, if we have deferred commitment, then it's way easier to manage our blockers. Because we can defer the commitment until the point where we know that we will have less impediments. Yeah. So this is actually a pattern that, to a certain extent, maintains itself. It enables itself. So it's like a chemical reaction that just maintains itself. Yeah? That's why it's called an autocatalytic system. Okay. Still following? Yeah. Cool. So such an autocatalytic pattern is the basis of a capability. Yeah. It already fulfills the check mark, the checkbox of a capability in terms of it maintains itself. Once a consistent outcome, you create a consistent outcome because it maintains itself. Yeah. So we're still starting to see the formation of a capability. So capabilities emerge, and especially what we see, like the practices, also patterns, yeah, are connected with each other. You cannot look at the patterns in isolation, right? On the right-hand side, we have the pattern that we recognize very much as in the Kanban community. On the left-hand side, we have a pattern that we see quite, we are very familiar in the XP community. Yeah? So on the left-hand side, if we synchronize our cadence, so people can start and stop together, it's much easier to work together, to work in cells, what I call in cells, like a pair, which is a cell, or a mob, which is also a cell. So if we synchronize our cadence, it's much easier to work in cells. Now, if we work in cells, people work together on the same item. Knowledge gets transferred between people, which means that we get a higher staff liquidity. Yeah? Staff liquidity meaning that we have more overlapping competencies in our team. One person can more easily take over the job of another person. We have more multi-skilled people. Yeah. Now, if we have more multi-skilled people, does that help or hinder my, my flow? Does that help or hinder my limiting of WIP? Does it help it or hinder it? Yeah. It clearly helps it. If I have more people that can work on the same work item, that can take over each other's job, it's easier to improve collaboratively. Yeah. It's easier, you get less blockers, because you get less dependencies, you get less blockers. So it's easier to limit your WIP because we have overlapping skills. Yeah. So a pattern that emerged in maybe more in the XP community or those types of communities actually helps a pattern that, or enables a pattern that has developed in the Kanban community. They help each other. Okay. Now, if you've followed the previous slide, you might see it coming. You might see it coming, that you get a circle of patterns, an autocatalytic set of patterns. Yeah. A set of capabilities, because the capabilities do form in between the patterns, a set of capabilities that enabled each other. Yeah. So what we call a co-evolving set of capabilities, right? So a pattern that, that forms a capability that enables another pattern to form a certain capability, and they enable each other, okay? If we have a supply side capability, right? That enables a demand to be formed, a demand side capability to be formed. And if we have that demand side capability, that enables a supply side capability to form, and they need each other. Yeah, so that's an example. Yeah. So we've got capabilities that enable each other. Yeah. And again, that helps to sustain our capability. Yeah. So in the big picture, and this might be a little bit overwhelming, but I'm going to guide you through it.
I like it.
Yeah. So in the big picture, and the details of this, probably they're wrong, but I think the big picture is right. So the big picture contains 3 colors, and those 3 colors are representative of flow learning and collaboration. So we already talked through the flow, the blue one. We already talked to that. That enables a capability of deferred commitments. Okay, the capability of deferred commitments is actually enabling for time boxing, right? This is the problem that a lot of Scrum teams struggle with. Yeah, the lead times are not short enough. How can you time box if your lead times are longer than your time box? It's impossible, right? Okay, so you need the capability of deferred commitment that comes from flow to actually enable you to increase your options, to enable you to time box. If you don't have options, you cannot time box, because then you're committing to something that in the end is variable and that will not allow you to deliver predictably. Yeah. So you need to be able to defer commitment. You need to be able to have multiple options in your sprint commitment, for example, so that at the end of the sprint, you can still commit to your goal and deliver to your goal without having to overcommit to all the options. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, that predictable delivery that comes out of that time boxing, that predictable delivery is important to create frequent integration. Yeah, you need to be able to say, we are going to deliver whatever happens, we are going to deliver at the end of the month, so that we can synchronize at the end of the month with multiple teams. We can synchronize, or with multiple people. We can have an integration point where we come together, take stock, and move on, and learn and adapt. Yeah. Now that frequent integration is important to have a synchronized cadence, so that we can work in cadence, which enables work in cells, which enables staff liquidity, which enables our so dear collaborative improvement, which enables our limiting of WIP. Okay. So we have a set of capabilities that support each other. Can you be more successful if you have an eye for all of them? Yeah, for sure. If you only have an eye for one of them, your chances of success are less, right? I didn't point to it very much, but enabling means you increase your chances of something to happen. It's not a direct causality in terms of it shall happen, but you increase your chances of something to happen. Yeah? Okay. And so if you work on your flow so that you can defer your commitment, it increases your chances of being able to deliver in a time box, which increases your chances of being able to work in cells, which increases your chances of being able to limit your WIP. Okay. So I've got a couple of questions here. How does disconnect with the findings from state of DevOps report and DORA metrics? Explaining Accelerate. Now, I must admit, I'm not familiar with this. So maybe Anthony, if you can.
So this is quite a long question. Happy to do it at the end, but
okay.
Basically, there's some fairly sharp and well-researched causal links between company performance, software delivery performance, and the actual and DevOps performance, right? And some of what we're talking about here, I can see pretty sharp reflections in that research. And I wanted to bring that to your attention and see what you had to say about it. That's all. I'm happy to do it at the end.
Okay, maybe let's do that at the end. I see another question from Darren. Using polarity techniques, I assuming that you're referring here to polarity management. I forgot the name of the person that came up with it. And so yes, very much. This is very much inspired by polarity management. Not thinking in polarities, not thinking in polarities of Scrum, Kanban, not thinking in terms of those polarities, but actually managing the polarity and integrated thinking in terms of building on the contradiction to come up with a better solution. Cool. So we see the formation of patterns out of practices. We see the formation of capabilities, and then most importantly, how this all connects. So this is not like a roadmap. It's just like if you're aware of all those connections, you're going to be better equipped as a coach, and probably a good coach, which a good coach really has those connections in mind, anyhow. But we're making it explicit. Yeah. Okay. Now the matter of scale, because that's what probably attracted you. The matter of scale. So first of all, I think we need to recognize the more is different principle. I think in a lot of when people talk about scale, they make this mistake that they think the thinking is like what works on the team level also works on the organizational level. Well, I don't think that's true. More really is different. More really is different. An individual is different from a team, is different from an organization, is different from an ecosystem. It's really different. So what works at the team level doesn't necessarily work at the organizational level. So practices do not scale well. Yeah, the practice of column WIP limits, work maybe at the team level. Yeah, maybe work in a certain workflow, but don't work at the organizational level. Yeah. Scale matters. Scale also introduces a bigger part of the value stream. So oftentimes when we scale, it's not just downstream, the delivery side, but we also need to look at the demand side. And again, upstream is different from downstream. Okay. So we really introduce a difference. Okay. Now the downstream response. This is the downstream response. If you remember, how do we deal with frictions? We can deal with it from a downstream perspective, or we can deal with it from an upstream perspective. Okay. Is this fair to say that this is really a downstream response? Yeah. If you don't recognize this is the scaled agile framework picture. Yeah. So this really is a downstream response. We give a blueprint. We talk about these are the levels in your organization. Yeah. And these are the practices that at each level you need to apply. We look at practices in isolation, right? Scaled agile framework. We don't deal with discovery. Let's plug in a module for discovery. Yeah, that's a mechanistic view of organizations. Okay. Now I'm being a little bit dishonest to the scaled agile framework. I'm being dishonest to the scaled agile framework. And I'm talking a little bit about it with disrespect, and I don't want to do that. I want to emphasize that I want to be respectful for it. And maybe as a Kanban person, you might dismiss and say, yeah, but that's the scaled agile framework. Yes. But the question is, are we doing the same? Yeah? Are we doing the same? Are we having also a downstream response? Okay. So you can substitute this picture with your own favorite scaling picture. Huh? Yeah. It's a downstream response. Okay. So what is the upstream response? Well, we're going to look at patterns. Okay, what patterns of practices do we see occurring that help us with tensions when we deal with scaling? What patterns of practices do we see occurring and how do those patterns of practices deal with the tensions that are the result of scaling. Yeah. So the patterns, they help us to see what is similar. They help us to see what is similar across scales. They help us to see what is similar across organizations, and they help us to see what is similar across methods. Okay. At the basic level, for us, the similarity starts with the DNA of work, right? Our assumption is that at all times, there's three components that are fundamental, just like the building blocks of DNA. It's flow, patterns of flow, patterns of collaboration, and patterns of learning. Those are the three components. And those three components combined are sufficient to explain all the diversity that we can see. Yeah. So that's at the basic level. Okay. So we've analyzed those, and probably what was in your mind in the previous analysis with the big picture there, the overwhelming picture there. This contains the pattern of flow with limiting width, the pattern of collaboration with work cells, and the pattern of learning with time boxing. Yeah? And so probably you had in your mind the team level, but they will also help us at the organizational, even beyond the organizational level. Okay, so let's do that analysis a little bit. So we're going to start with friction. Now, when we start scaling, it goes beyond friction. Yeah. So at the team level, we might still talk about friction, but when we start scaling, it's not just friction. It's a force that there's a force that actually generates friction. It's entropy, right? Apparently, if organization scales, there's some kind of entropy that kicks in. Yeah? I don't know whether you've got the same feeling, but there is a form of entropy, a friction generating force that actually kicks in. Yeah. Large organizations do create more friction than small organizations because of this entropy. It's like the Red Queen effect. You need to keep on running in order to stay at the same place, yeah? Which is kind of frustrating. So what kind of things am I talking about? Well, whether we want it or not, if organization scales, they tend to create a workflow. Yeah. So where does that entropy come from? In this case, where does that entropy come from? Yeah, well, we acquired maybe a new organization, and that organization is not in the same city as we are, but in another continent, right? Oh, yeah. Now that's a friction creating force. Yeah. Maybe after a certain point in time, people started to have personal conflicts, so that creates silos, right? Or one manager that is quite protecting of turf protecting up, and that creates a silo. Yeah. Or we've got an initiative coming from some consultant that says we need to optimize your organization, and we start optimizing for the wrong thing, like resource efficiency. That's an entropy, a friction creating force. Yeah. So the patterns that we see there is workflow does, I don't know what your feeling is, but workflow does seem to start when organizations scale, right? When they start to become bigger, we start to see workflow emerging. And with workflow, I mean where work is handed over from the hand of one person or one group of persons to the hand of another group of persons, okay? Now, obviously that creates friction when workflow starts to occur because we start to have handoffs, and handoffs are friction, yeah? We start to have loopbacks, because maybe in step 2 or step 3, we find an issue that actually originated in step 1. So we send the work back to step 1. Is it a good practice? No, but it naturally occurs. Yeah. we see parallel teams, yeah, with dependencies, of course. Yeah, it starts to happen somehow. We see teams that have unclear boundaries, yeah, which creates friction. We start to see teams with dependencies on each other. We start to see bottlenecks appearing, which creates friction. We have an end-to-end. We start an end-to-end flow to start occurring. We start to have an upstream and a downstream that have a mismatch. Yeah, so all kinds of those patterns we see occurring. So in the sequential workflow, the friction, we get handoffs that lead to loopbacks that create backflow, and backflow that creates starvation downstream. The pattern that we saw occurring, which is very familiar for the Kanban people, is column WIP limits, but column WIP limits by themselves do not function completely. We need also have to have a stop the line practice, where if a problem occurs down the line, downstream, we need to stop the line, have people from upstream to come and help, which pulls knowledge upstream, which supports, again, column WIP limits. We have parallel cross-team flows, where we have dependencies between teams. Well, we can't go into the details, but we can start thinking about a token system, capacity tokens, that help to manage the capacity of the different teams and help to synchronize all the different teams so that teams that have a dependency start work together and finish work together. Yeah. And so if we do that, we can have more flexibility in terms of managing capacity. So we can decide whether if we want to do something, we can keep it in the existing teams, or we can form what is called pacemaker teams. And then if we have pacemaker teams, we integrate knowledge, which supports our way of managing capacity. Yeah.
A question.
Yes.
Pacemaker teams, is that pretty much like another expression of drum buffer rope?
That's to a certain extent an expression of drum buffer rope. Yeah. Pacemaker teams occurred in manufacturing, have started to develop in manufacturing, where you have an end of the line team that integrates all the work, that is a multifunctional work cell that delivers the work to the customer, and that pulls in work from supply teams.
Okay, so they're the drum.
They are the drum. Yeah, they're the. You put Herbie in front of the line. Yeah, you put Herbie in front of the line, and so typically pacemaker teams in a knowledge work environment are the teams that you put together to. If you have multiple people having to work together for a longer period of time. Yeah. And then you still use Kanban to pull in work from, or capacity tokens to pull in work from other teams. Yeah. Okay, end-to-end flow. The friction there, we've got a mismatch between the tempo of the upstream and the tempo of the downstream. And that leads to fluctuation. Demand starts to fluctuate, and we don't cope with that fluctuation. And that leads to instability because now the downstream teams need to upstaff, downstaff, upstaff, downstaff, but there's a delay. So there's a mismatch between the fluctuation in the upstream and the fluctuation in the downstream. Everything starts to rock like a boat with water in the keel. And before you know it, the boat capsizes. Yeah. Now I'm painting a very grim picture here, but you get the picture, I guess. And so the pattern that I have started to develop here is you start implementing order points to level the demand, to actually level the demand, to make the demand more stable. And downstream people, because of the order points, have to go help upstream, yeah, so that you can better triage upstream in terms of, yeah, this is something we need to start early, or this is something where we can start late. Yeah. So again, a pattern that emerges to help with that friction. Yeah. Now, obviously, those three together, combined, also support each other. It's hard to see multi-team with capacity tokens separate from upstream, downstream with order points. So they also form, with the workflow, they also form a set of groups of patterns that reinforce each other, that create a certain capability. Yeah. So the patterns here are not a substitute for your favorite scaling picture. They're not a substitute for a certain set of practices, but they are actually helpful in terms of creating the capabilities. And what kind of capabilities, organizational capabilities, are we talking about here? Well, essentially the capability to match demand and supply. Yeah. The capability on the demand side to make better use of a constrained supply, because we know that the supply on the supply side is constrained. We have constraints on the supply side. We have bottlenecks. We have limited capacity. Yeah. So the capability to deal with that on the demand side, and then the capability on the supply side to better deal with the fluctuating demand. We know that demand is not stable. We know that demand keeps on fluctuating. So we need to have the capability to deal with that fluctuating demand. And so, for example, staff liquidity is an enabler for that capability, so that we can more easily adapt to changes in the demand. Okay. So the patterns are not a substitute for the blueprints, for the scaling picture, but they're actually supporting it in terms of creating the necessary capabilities that are needed at the organizational level. So the focus here is not on replacing the methods. It's not on taking away the importance of doing and being, practices and principles. It's not about that, but it's actually on terms of complementing it by focusing on the becoming, right? By focusing on how do we develop the capabilities to actually do and be, to actually meet the principles, okay? So the focus is on the becoming, and the way how is by using the full brain, by using not half of only the left half of our brain, not just using the half of our brain, but actually using our full brain, right? Actually not just using the left part, which is about looking at things in isolation, theory, methods, making trade-offs, but also looking at using the right brain in terms of looking at the connections between things. How do all those practices connect with each other? How do they form patterns together? How do they form a capability together? Okay. It's not just about the left brain in terms of making either or choices. Either we focus on flow, or we focus on collaboration, or we focus on learning, right? No, it's about and thinking, about, no, we want it all. We want to have and flow, and collaboration, and learning. And you know what? They support each other. So it's very much in line with our current knowledge of the brain. Yeah. A nice side remark is brain research also indicates that if you eliminate the right brain, okay, and only the left brain is functioning, you start to become overly optimistic. The right brain is there to keep the left brain in check. Yeah? So people that have a lesion on the right brain tend to be completely overambitious, over-optimistic about things. Yeah? The right brain is a little bit too idealistic. And we need to, the left brain is a little bit too idealistic, too optimistic. The right brain is keeping the left brain in check. Yeah? And the reason is, if you only look at the parts, you don't see the problems. Where do the tensions occur? In the connections, of course. And so our right brain is a little bit more dark. It's a little bit more pessimistic. And it is because it needs to keep the left brain in check. I think that applies also here. Okay, I went a little bit over time. But I hope there's still time for...
I've scheduled the meetup until past, so for 1.5 hours. So.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm well in time. Okay. So it's still for me, it's still an invitation to start using the right brain and explore how we can better use our right brain and think upstream.
Cool. I've just answered to Shady, who asked if I know of any case studies where this has been applied. He asked me in private.
Yeah. So there's a couple of people, especially maybe Wim, if Wim is still on the line, he can talk a little bit about how he's actually using some of this thinking.
Yes, so I'm still I'm still with you. Yes. So actually, how I'm using it is so I'm working with together with Patrick. We are working in quite a large organization, and yeah, so there's a lot of dependency between the teams. So when they have to deliver something, it's about, for each team, about 20% of the things that they do is depending on other teams to do also something. So they focused quite some time on the parallel flow, so on the inter-team work. But so they question, do we see the bottlenecks? But what I did, what we see is at a certain moment, yeah, a pattern hits its own, yeah, path that it can grow. So mainly what we do is giving them going to the place of action. Actually, they do it themselves to observe. But why can't we continue with this? Why is it so difficult, for example, for them to have a better insight in the capacity, how they can use this capacity for this inter-team work? And actually, what we see is that the friction is in the end-to-end flow. The upstream of those teams tend to develop, tend to prepare work just a bit more for one team. But now you see that, yeah, there's a mismatch in what is prepared, and the whole, they become less predictable. So giving them this insight, they start to question themselves, like, yeah, but so if we are developing too much for one team, can we do something about it? Can we observe it? So, and yes, there's a practice like order points, but you don't introduce the practice of order points. They observe it, and at a certain moment, maybe when you step in, just to give them a bit more direction, you can mention order points. But this, what it helped me in developing this thinking for them, not just offering theories and methods, but helping them to see where they hit certain friction and to work on it. So that's a bit my story with this, with these patterns.
So what Wim is continuously telling me is that he uses actually this picture. He's working at the multi-team level of an infrastructure team, an infrastructure group actually. And so he's using continuously this to check off, to navigate, like where do we see the frictions occurring? And then if we see this friction occurring, can I push a little bit further in terms of developing the pattern that addresses the friction? If not, I look at the preconditions. I look at the enablers for that pattern. And then I start working on those things. And you continuously circle through these patterns to help the organization develop. Yeah. So you're not starting from a preconceived, these are the practices that you need to put in place. You're actually kind of dancing with the organization.
Yeah, I like that picture.
The coaching dance.
Yeah.
That's something that Jürgen Appello and Jason Little talk about in Lean Change, and those models, they talk about dancing with the system.
Yeah, dancing with the system. Cool, nice. Some other questions. Teams, Anthony, teams in permanent overload. So I talked about two capabilities, organizational capabilities. One is the capability of dealing with the fluctuating demand. That's on the supply side, and it's a fair expectation that your teams should develop the capabilities to deal with a fluctuating demand, but you know that there's a limit. There's a limit to the amount of load you can put on a team. And so the other capability is on the demand side, to shape the demand so that you take into account the constraints that you have downstream. Yeah, and those are two capabilities that reinforce each other. You need both. You need both. So those are co-evolving capabilities. Co-evolving capabilities. And oftentimes we're a little bit lopsided. In most organizations, we're a little bit lopsided about it. We look at the demand, the supply side capabilities, and we don't look enough to the demand side capabilities. I know that was Eddie. In terms of tend to running permanent overload.
So, you know, there's like fascinating examples of, if you look at that demand, is contact tracing for people who test positive for COVID, right? Mm-hmm. How quickly do you need to get established who those contacts are, establish that they are also quarantined or isolated until their positive negative status can be suitably determined, you know, and that stuff has, you know, like I said, as the queue gets longer, the risks of missing something get higher, right?
Higher. Yeah. I wish we were holding the entire COVID discussion in the terms that I just described. Yeah. I don't know over there, but here in Belgium, we're creating a fluctuating demand. Yeah? We're not thinking about this in terms of leveling. So we let the crisis a little bit accumulate. So we get an overload, then we take all kinds of measures. It goes down and it goes up again and it goes down again. We're not applying flow thinking there. Huh?
I actually think the New Zealand government is doing that quite well, and I wonder where they got it from.
Not from me. Not from me. Okay. A question from my side. How do you connect with this, and what can we do to help you connect with this?
quick question. Are you going to share a PDF of this afterwards for everyone to take? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
No, my name is actually Patrick, eh? But it's
sorry,
somehow...
Patrick.
Yeah, it's no problem. It just shows wrongly on Zoom.
Yeah, I said that at the start. Anthony, you might have come in a bit later. So he's Patrick Steyaert, and his partner is Arlette. She's in the background. They're using the same Zoom.
Got it. Sorry.
And I tried to switch to my account, but Zoom doesn't accept it. I need to be Arlette. Unclear identity. So, so what is the point of connection for you? What's the thing that connects? What resonates with you? And what can we help to make it resonate better? What can we do?
I must admit, I kind of struggled for the first 10 minutes. I was thinking, I wonder where you're going with this. And then the bit where I started getting it and understanding it was when you had the feedback loop. I don't know if you can go back, but before that, maybe it was a bit of theory, and then I suddenly thought, oh yeah, this starts starting to make sense. You can see a little bit of the reason behind the thinking.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's definitely different to the like a simulation-based thing, Patrick. You know, where everyone gets to experience it first and then understand the theory afterwards.
Yeah.
Whereas this is the other way around.
Mm. Yeah, I was also thinking if I had understood this before I knew about Kanban, I think I would have struggled.
Yeah. I'm assuming quite a bit of Kanban, but yeah, I'm assuming quite a bit of Kanban knowledge. Yeah?
Patrick, I've just come out of a systems thinking workshop. So for me, the connection and causal connections and systems within systems pretty much like was bang on. It lined up directly with where the previous talk was. So for those who are doing systems thinking, it's an easy jump. Well, it's colourful pictures. I like
it. So the pictures are let's doing, yeah. That's yeah.
Might be helpful. Could be something like a short exercise in root cause analysis, starting with the symptom and then finding out. Just as an idea.
Yeah.
And a practical walkthrough for like said organization, like a scenario, right? A scenario or two that really shows that up. And you can see it in the meta patterns, those who've been in the scenarios and can make the connections. If you've got a room full of people who are not sure how many levels, you know, where they've all come from, a scenario is a really great way to connect, I think. It's just personal, very personal feedback.
Yeah, cool. So we need to eat our own dog food. Experience first, theory second. Then.
Champagne, drink your own champagne.
It's always hard. Cool. Any closing questions or Silke?
I'm just watching this chat as much as you do. We should probably talk. Yeah, I think I would love to explore how this model relates to complex adaptive systems theory.
Yeah. So the a major source of inspiration. So Alicia Guerrero gave a talk quite a few years ago at Lean UX conference, I think, or Lean Agile Scotland. So she gave a talk and she made a reference to enabling constraints. I don't know, she talked about enabling constraints. And she gave a reference to a book called Biological Autonomy. Yeah, and actually the notation that I'm using with the produces and enables actually comes out of that work. Now, biological autonomy is all about how at different levels of organization, subcell, cell, multi-cell organs, people, and then yeah, I think organisms. So at multiple levels of organization, how autocatalytic self-enabling loops are a foundation for biological autonomy. So this connects very much with the theory of complex adaptive systems. It's actually inspired by it. The problem I had for many years is how can I actually use it, really very much use it in a way that that makes it useful. I think that's part of the problem that we have in the communities. We talk a lot about complex adaptive systems, and then it's like this schizophrenic brains. So on the one hand, we very much we're very much concerned with practices, and then on the other hand, we're talking about complex adaptive systems, but we seem to have a hard time of connecting those two. And what I'm trying to do is to really connect those two. Not talking about complex adaptive systems, but
Дисциплина съм слушнал и звукът ми е гласът точно.
Ой, that's a
I've just
wrong language.
It last minute. I think that was a mistake. Right. I think right. Eddie sent some more links. Thanks, Eddie. Actually, and
yeah. And another reference there, which is worthwhile looking, is Stuart Kaufman, because he's foundational in terms of what autocatalytic systems are. So he laid some of the foundations there. Stuart, I'll put it into the chat box.
Eddie just put that book in the chat box, and thanks.
Yeah.
There was quite a good discussion between Eddie and Anthony going on there. Hang on, Stuart Kaufman, you've just sent it only to myself, Patrick.
Ah, yeah.
Here we go.
Voila.
Cool. So I'd say let's wrap it up. Thank you so much. I also want to say Arlette, because I always see your name on, on the bottom of the of your window, Patrick. Yeah, it was really cool to have you here and be the first ones to see this talk. I think everybody enjoyed it from what I could see from the feed back in the chat box. And we'll stay connected anyway for next trainings. Thanks everybody for coming in, and enjoy your evenings, day, wherever you are, nights. And see you next time, next month. It'll be about Wardley mapping.
Brilliant. Thanks, Patrick.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao. Thank you, Patrick and Arlette.
Thanks, everyone.
Danielle, do you want to stay in for the...
Yeah.
You want to stop recording?
Oh, yes.